Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about this evening. My guest this evening is Marcia J. Myers, who I've known for a long, long time. And I can't find the appropriate words to describe who she is and what she's about. So you'll learn more about her in the first half of the show, where I talk to her about these things. It's what I call the bio segment of the show. And the second half of the show, we'll talk about the subject of the show, Rethinking Psychiatry, and things associated with that title. So it's been a long time since you've been on the show before. How are you feeling right now?
Good. I'm glad I'm here. I'm delighted to be here, Don, with you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
indeed.
I'm glad you're here too. So let's pitch right in. And your name is Marcia J. Myers. What's the J mean?
Jean. Marcia Jean.
Do you like that name?
I do indeed. I've gotten used to it. Over 66 years now, I've been carrying it around, and I've gotten very used to it.
66 years. You're looking well. Really, that's terrific. Yeah, okay.
You know what it's from?
What?
Dancing on the transformative edge with people like you.
Wow.
Yes.
I don't know what I'm going to do about that. That sounds terrific.
Isn't that what we do?
Yes,
Don?
yes,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
why we keep coming across each other.
So, where were you born?
I was born in Hastings, Nebraska. My dad was in the Air Force, World War II. I tell everybody I'm the first baby boomer. I was actually born in 1945, and that's when the war was over. So my dad was stationed in Hastings, Nebraska. And my dad carried a heavy, heavy burden from that war, as I think every soldier does. So that's a good question to start with, because it really affected my whole life, that he was an officer, a hero. He flew into Pearl Harbor the morning it was attacked.
Really?
Yeah, so he was a hero, but the burden of being a soldier and killing other people, really, he carried it all his life, and it's a hard one.
And that affected you?
Yes,
And that's
indeed.
probably one of
Yes,
the contributing
indeed.
factors is how you are today in your life.
You bet. You bet. I'm going to stop that stuff. My dad suffered too much, and so did the family from that experience.
Yeah.
So that was a juicy question.
So Nebraska,
Yeah.
cultural heritage, anything significant about your cultural heritage that's worth repeating other than that you were brought up in Nebraska?
And also that when I was 15, I went and spent a summer there with my godparents on the farm. And growing up in Seattle, right in the middle of Seattle, it was a wonderful experience.
You grew up in Seattle?
Yeah.
When did you move to Seattle?
When I was 5, so I really
5.
did. And I really grew up there. But being able to spend that summer on the farm and have my godparents on a farm in Nebraska really was a wonderful, wonderful thing for me.
Why was being on the farm in Nebraska for a summer delightful? What was it about? Give me a couple of
I
ideas.
think the rooster crowing in the morning, everybody working together. I mean, everyone on that farm worked together, you know, going out and getting the eggs. Earl, my godfather, would go out on the tractor, and it was a real community there. And there were about 15 of us in that community that summer because there were other people there. It was just, the way that family farm, that it's not idealized. I don't think it's idealized. I think that's the way things are supposed to work in a community. And also the smaller community in Fairfield. It was the little farming community there.
Did you learn to milk a cow?
I tried, but they were doing it by hand still. Yeah.
Really?
So that's pretty wonderful.
How was the milk then? Was it good?
Oh, everything was so good. Everything was so good and so fresh. Yeah. So, yeah, that was a wonderful experience. I think that's made a difference in my grounding also.
Your grounding.
Growing up in Seattle wasn't, well, anyway, it was an experience in itself. So.
How about a religious preference? Do you have one of those?
Well, I'm glad you asked that too, because I was brought up Lutheran. And I say Lutheran, you know, you hear about recovering Catholics.
I'm one of them.
Are you? Okay. And I say the first time I went to a Catholic church after they started speaking in English rather than in Latin, I thought, I know all of this, because of course that's what Martin Luther did. He translated it into the language of the people. So what I'm saying is Lutheran isn't that far from Catholicism, and I feel in lots of ways I'm a recovering Lutheran, because I got that God the Father, sin, you know, that we are burdened in childbirth because of Eve, and all those stories that were really confusing to me, but I sure tried hard to understand. I think we all did.
Yeah.
And they were in English, so I couldn't, I had to try to interpret them. Anyway, so I think though, and I'll say this, I think this is significant. I grew up knowing I was a spiritual person.
What does that mean? What's a spiritual person?
I taught school for 30 years, and I would ask my classes, the majority of the time I was in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, 6 years in kindergarten though. That's where I learned everything I needed to know. But I would ask my kids if they knew they were spiritual beings, because I think in this society where we are so focused on material things and being the way we're supposed to be in order to be successful, that the spirit is often lost.
What is the spirit?
The spirit is the part of you that is alive and good and knows the right from the wrong. The right from the wrong being what is best for the whole, not just for me, but for life in general. Because I personally think after my trip so far for 66 years, that we are all interconnected. And I think that I got that basic message from the Lutheran Church, but then we were also connected to this father who was, you know, patrolling the whole shebang and in charge.
So you see yourself as a spiritual person.
Very much so.
What is a spiritual person?
Well, we're all spiritual people. It's just that I think that in this society, our spirits are often really suppressed because of fear. That's what suppresses. And in school, you see kindergartners.
One more time, Marcia.
It's our life.
Spirit?
It's the
What's the
goodness of
spirit?
our life. It's the goodness of our life. It's the goodness of us and our belief in that. And our energetic connectedness to that goodness and to each other. I don't know how to explain it better than that, except that
That's good enough.
It is energy, and it is interconnectedness, and it is good, or love, is how I see it.
Am I spiritual or love? See, now that's what I was looking for.
Yes. Oh, most certainly. That's why we're dancing on the transformative edge.
Dancing on the transformative. I got to jump in.
Oh, you'll remember.
What's the transformative edge?
It's where the change is taking place. The consciousness of this whole planet is rising, and as it rises, the edge of our reality is changing, and it's been pretty contracted by fear. I say for the last 5,000 years since we've been in this empire kind of power and control model. So as we're waking up, and everyone knows it in their heart, that having as much as we do in the United States and trying to get more for ourselves is not right. Kindergartners know that.
And the we you're talking about, you says we are awakening. Who's the we? All human beings?
I really think so. I definitely believe in the universal voice, universal consciousness, and I think the kind of show you have gives words to it. And one of the things I really believe, and you know from my work, my activism work, that my groups that I've been involved with are on the transformative edge. They're pushing consciousness, and we're practicing new language. One of the things we're really working hard on is to get all the military, that's why I don't say I'm on the point of the arrow anymore. All of this kind of military or suffering, you know, we're suffering or we have to fight harder, none of that. We have to, as far as I'm concerned, look at it as a flowing thing, a goodness thing, an opening up.
So
and it's happening.
So you're an activist.
You bet I am.
What does that mean?
That means I'm working to activate. It means being a teacher. Yeah, a teacher's an activist, aren't they? Yeah.
Aren't some of the Tea Partiers activists too?
Yeah, you know what? I suppose. I really don't get involved with people who are in a consciousness that I can't relate to. So I'm not judging them. I just don't have much to do with them or think about them. I'm working at a different level. So yeah, I suppose.
And that level is a transformative
Edge.
edge. What's going to happen to me when I'm transformed, like you're talking about now?
Well, you already are, Don. You're going to have a show like this, and you're going to have people like myself on it, and you're going to help other people wake up. And when I wake up to the goodness, that's what it's about. I know I sound sort of like I am a spiritual person, right? And you know, the thing is, they take things that are good, and they make, this is 1984 kind of thing. What's wrong with the new age? I mean, we need a new age, don't we? I don't know if I'm new age. I do believe in people, and I'm an expert in people. I tell people you can't argue with me. 6 years in kindergarten with 62 kids a day, and they were wonderful. They were wonderful.
Yeah.
And as each year passed by, they became more and more fearful because of the competition, the A, B, C, D, and all of that eagerness, excitement, caring for one another. Then we start contracting with fear. So that's, I think we're coming out of that.
Do you have a partner nowadays?
I do not, Don. I'm still looking.
Oh my
Yeah, I'm still.
gosh, she's available.
Yes, indeed.
Email her.
I'm looking for that partner. I'm looking for that partner that's as passionate as I am about this transformation. Yeah, and then about me, of course. But I also have to say, Don, I have lots of partners. That's one of the things I realized in the last few years, that in this activism, in these groups that I do, I have partners all across the United States that I couldn't be doing what I'm doing without working with them. And that's what I think a true soulmate partner does too. We're cheerleaders for each other.
Name some of these groups you're working with in your activism.
Well, I think the one I have to say first is the First Unitarian Church of downtown Portland. That really has given me a foundation. And I also work at the national level with the UUA, or Unitarian Universalist Association.
Yeah.
And this is not New Age, or maybe it is. This goes back to Thoreau and what's his name, Emerson. Those Louisa May Alcott. These people who were talking about a more holistic, unified way of seeing. Instead of one God, one,
And they're
Father.
more in tune with experiencing rather than living for the future or the past.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that we are living in heaven right now. We are living, we're not living to get to heaven. We're creating, and we can create heaven right here. This is our life. It's not the next life, it's this life that we're interested in, and we have 7 principles that, as I said, they go back, hundreds of years. The first one being the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. That's not a hard one to swallow. The inherent worth and dignity of every human being. And then the last one is the interconnectedness of life. So what I'm saying is Unitarian Universalism is about this oneness of us, of all of us here with this planet Earth. So that is my foundation since I retired from teaching. I was very much active in my union, and I tell people now that I'm still working for my union because I wouldn't be getting that check every month if I didn't have a union. I don't deserve that retirement any more than every other person in the United States of America, and so I really get upset about people who feel like they're entitled to their which they are, to their retirement, but if they're going to take the retirement, they need to get out there and change the system so that everybody gets a retirement. And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it as much as I can.
That's why you're an activist, huh?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, that was quite a long answer, but it is the Unitarian Church, and then from there I have started other groups. But I have to say, First Unitarian Church and our social justice program has very much supported my work.
Social justice.
Kate Lohr is our social justice minister, and
Yeah.
she's a wonderful support for me.
You have children or grandchildren?
I have 2 incredible daughters,
Yeah.
and they're my best teachers in this world. And now I have 2 incredible grandchildren, so I have to keep learning. Yes, indeed. If you have kids, I know you do, they push the limits as far as our consciousness.
Yeah, they keep me alive and functioning and interested.
Yeah. Interested in this world and the future.
And your political persuasion, are you left, right, or center?
Well, I guess I just want the best for the most.
So does the right, so does the center, so does the left. How do you see yourself?
Well, I guess,
overall?
most often I will vote Democrat, but I also, wow, I'm a Nader fan. I'm looking for integrity. That man has integrity. And
You are weird,
yes.
Ralph Nader.
Yes, indeed,
So
and I'm
am I.
proud of it.
Nader,
And
right.
you know what? Oh, that's such a not a wonderful, but it's a terrible example of blaming the victims. When the ones of us that voted for Ralph Nader were blamed for the president that we got. Something's wrong with the system. It's not wrong with me or you. So anyway, yeah, I vote where I see the most integrity.
And memberships in political, social, or civic organizations, do you have any of those that are worth mentioning,
Well, I would say,
other than the Unitarian Universalist
yeah,
Church?
Unitarian, and then there's the party.
Oregon Progressive Party?
No, the one with Barbara Dudley and that crew, that the Working Family.
Working Family Party. yeah.
Party. I joined that party, the Working Family Party.
I'm Oregon Progressive Party. And what
And
about,
I might have joined Progressive Party at some time, but the last one I joined because I truly
Some
believe,
alternative, huh?
Yeah, and the same thing with integrity of their agenda is what I'm looking for.
what about the new Justice Party? The former mayor of Salt Lake City,
You have to
Anderson,
tell me about it.
the Justice Party, it looks very impressive. Google Justice Party. I don't have any information available now. The guy, his credentials are impeccable, and his thinking is broad and comprehensive, and he could be a Naderite or a Kucinichite or one of those legitimate progressive human beings concerned about human welfare as a priority over economics and everything else. Anderson, I can't think of his first name. I shouldn't mention his name if I didn't know more about him.
That's okay. Now everybody can Google.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about that computer.
So, tell me about persons from the past or alive today that you particularly look up to or admire other than Ralph Nader.
My mentor really is, and I'm glad you asked, I think, yes, I did indeed, brought her book, Riane Eisler. Riane Eisler in the 80s wrote the book, The Chalice and the Blade. This isn't The Chalice and the Blade, this is her newest book, which is called The Real Wealth of Nations, Creating Caring Economics. Riane, if you haven't read The Chalice and the Blade, and you probably have, haven't you, Donna, or
No.
not? Okay, it was a groundbreaking book. She's known as one of the 10 visionaries, Tutu, and anyway, whoever they have on that list of 10 visionaries of our time. And Riane wrote about the fact that for 5,000 years now we've been in this power and control, male-dominated society, where our reality is, I say, inscribed, prescribed, and described from a male or a masculine point of view.
Well, what's wrong with that?
And really,
Don't
it would
get
be
me.
great if it were egalitarian, but it's very much a top-down model. So she was the first one. Archaeology, sociology, every study was based on the perspective, as you know, because women weren't even given any education up until the last, 70 years. So Riane is in her 70s now, her late 70s. She was an attorney, just going through law school when the teacher pretended like she wasn't in the room because she was a female. She's a little over 10 years, 15 years older than I am. So things have changed, but Rian was the first one to point that out, and it is an international bestseller. I mean, it's a classic,
Yes.
and it's a groundbreaking book,
yeah.
The Chalice and the Blade. Then she's written other books, and she started a association or a group called the Organization Partnership Studies, because it's all about partnership. And it's not, I should have said masculine rather than male, because we all have masculine traits and feminine traits, but in our society, the masculine traits are all supposed to be yours, feminine are supposed to be mine, feminine, and instead of that, we're in a balance of both.
Our society, mean the American society?
No, it pretty much permeates the world right now as far as the people who are in charge of the resources. Indigenous people work much more, or even like that family farm I was talking about, that was much more of a partnership model. The dad was still in charge. It was a Lutheran family, but what I'm saying is there was more of a partnership. Now, or what they're trying to do is the same old God the Father, he's in charge, the man's in charge, the castle, home is his castle. That is all disappearing now as we realize that men and women have both these traits, and that, as I said, like with my kindergartners, that we all want the best for each other.
So you admire Rian
I do.
Eisler and Ralph Nader, and who else comes to mind?
Well, I've worked a lot with David Corton, and he wrote The Great Turning from Empire to Earth Community. And he also wrote When Capitalism Rules the World. And David's book, When Capitalism Rules the World, that's another international bestseller. That came out right before the WTO up in Seattle, when people were looking around saying, what's going on? Yeah, he had written a book about it.
David Corten, K-O-R-T-E-N, yeah.
He's a very, he has a lot of integrity. And I have to say, David, bless his heart, I had worked with him before, but I got to read the Galley of The Great Turning, which is an amazing book. If you haven't read it, it's quite wonderful. He dedicated that book to Rian Eisler. I could have started crying because he's a credentialed white male, and he was dedicating this book to a woman who he admired because of this work I just told you about that she had recognized in the 80s.
Do you think David Corten is spiritual?
Yeah, yes. Yes, he's spiritual like I am.
So these
He
people
believes
that
in
you
the best.
admire or look up to, you consider them spiritual?
I do indeed. They are working for the best of that they can do with themselves for the whole good, for the good, the interconnectedness of the web of life. Yeah, yeah.
But then
Most certainly.
human beings must behave and relate to each other within this web of life. Isn't there something about human beings such that they don't work so successfully in this web of life, such that we have genocides and all those kinds of humans destroying human beings and making life miserable for huge segments of the human population around the world?
I happen to believe that's all socialized, and it's socialized with fear. And when someone is fearful, then they do things that go against
So
their
those behaviors are
spirits.
socialized.
They're socialized.
They're not genetically driven.
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe it at all. And like I say, I know. I taught kindergarten for 6 years. I saw those kids, and I also saw them as they went through this system that is fear-based. And I was thinking, Don, this is amazing. I taught in Gresham, and when I first started teaching, this has been about 30 years ago, I was called out in the hall to watch the principal, who's really a good guy. I liked him a lot. But he was spanking a first grader with one of those paddles that had holes in it. What I'm saying is that was part of the system. And I mean, I was a brand new teacher. I watched, but I was like aghast. I hadn't even thought about it. But what I'm saying is, talk about fear. And this has been the way up until lately, as Rian Eisler says, we brutalize and beat up on our kids. Whenever you raise your hand to a child, I mean, why in the world would anyone hit a child? But it's part of our system, slaves being beaten. And so that, though, I really believe we're raising our consciousness and realizing that's totally it makes no sense.
So if we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, then the world will change and people will become more spiritual?
Oh, no, no, no. I mean, people have to do things. They have to keep working together. They have to start recognizing that what I do to you, Don, is also affecting me. It's straight out of Martin Luther King, you know, what we do to the, and when he says least, he doesn't mean the least person, but to the person with the least amount of power.
How
we
do
do to
we
the
get
whole.
people to behave this way? Apparently a lot of them aren't.
If they go through our school system, you bet they aren't. If they watch our TV, you bet they aren't. If they play those little games that are all about war, we are an empire that breeds war, and we pay for war all over the world.
We being America?
The United States of America, the richest country, the richest and most powerful country in the history of the world. Yes, is that amazing? And then we wonder why our kids are confused.
They're yelling at me in the control room. We're going to have to take a break.
Control me? You knew you couldn't do that.
No, that's impossible. Let's take a break for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and talk some more about other stuff. Let's put a couple panels up there and turn the... Yes, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show because you were channel surfing or doing something else, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. And now we're going to start talking about rethinking psychiatry and what that means. And we will go for a while longer because my friend Marcia likes to talk, almost as much as I like to talk. So let's see where we go from here. So my first question is, what do you mean by rethinking psychiatry? What does that mean?
Well, at the beginning, when we started out, I talked about working on the transformative edge, which is what you're doing too. And part of this is our life is, and David, this is back to David Corton, says, and I believe him, our reality is inscribed, prescribed, described by the stories that we have accepted. And one of the stories we've accepted is this expert. Someone's an expert and knows the answers. And with psychiatry, it's the idea that someone is going to be able to help us with our emotional problems, our mental and emotional problems. The story we have right now is that they can help us by giving us some prescription drug. And that we have, if you have a real emotional problem, it's because you have an imbalance in your brain. Now, this is a story that has very, very little.
You don't believe that?
Well, the scientific research is not there to support this. What is there to support it are the pharmaceuticals. And how I got involved with this is because a very loved one of mine was caught up in the I call it mental illness system, as many people do, where she was told that she was mentally ill and put in the hospital. Mm-hmm. I was extremely concerned, and I went to hear Bob Whitaker speak at Powell's, and when I heard him speak,
Paul's big bookstore in
yeah,
Portland.
yeah, in Portland, Oregon, and he wrote this book, Anatomy of Epidemic, Magic Bullets, Psychiatric Drugs, and the Astonishing Rise of Mental Illness in America. It came out just a year ago, this April. I mean, it'll be a year in April. And he was at Powell's in August, the following August, and the place was packed. And what he said the very same thing that David Corton did, which is the stories are what our lives are defined by, and we've been sold a story that has no scientific basis. Now, Bob Whitaker, he's a medical journalist, works in Boston, has worked at Harvard. He was writing a series.
What's the story we've been told?
Well,
there's no basis in fact.
This broken brain, that we have a broken brain, or people the chemicals are off balance. And what he was doing was writing a series for the Boston Globe, and he was not questioning whether or not this theory was right, and that if you take certain chemicals, it'll help balance out your brain. He was just being a good journalist, looking for the research. He couldn't find the research. He couldn't find the research that substantiated
the brain is broken?
Exactly, and that these drugs in the long term helped. They do, the word
Didn't they have studies that showed that the drugs did indeed help?
They had studies that showed that the drugs did perturb, I like that word, perturb the brain for a period of time. And what the studies have shown is that the longer you're on the drug, the more the brain keeps trying to recalibrate back to the way it was. And pretty soon, it sort of gives up, or it gets worn down. The studies, now, I'm not saying drugs never work, and Bob doesn't say that either. But and it's coming out more and more because these have been suppressed. This research has been suppressed because the pharmaceuticals and the psychiatric industry, or psychiatric field has, if you've been to a psychiatrist lately or a psychologist, a lot of it is about prescription drugs.
What research has been suppressed? You said the research has been suppressed. What research?
That, for one thing, the longer people are on drugs, their lives, 25 years, that's what the studies are showing now, that their lives are shortened. This is average, in average. Also, that the longer they're on drugs, then they need to be on those drugs. In other words, their body gets used to the drug. The thing about it also is that this is interesting to me as a woman, and I sort of remember this. And I also got my own master's in counseling psychology, so I studied all this Freud and, all these guys. All these guys.
Yeah.
Very few. This was in the 80s I got my master's. And Carl Rogers was a very feminine voice at that time, caring, starting to open up that box that maybe the way you treated other people.
Is
And
to love
that's
them.
right, all of this goodness, and listen to them. You're a good
Yes.
listener. And so this whole idea of psychiatrists being experts about the brain, it's a medical model, but to me it's a reductionist model. Our mental, emotional, and physical being is so much more complex than even the heart. I'm talking about how it all goes together. And for psychiatrists to use a medical model on like taking our brain, taking our head off the rest of us. So why I'm saying this is in the 70s, psychiatry started losing people. A lot of women were going to psychologists, to counselors, to their friends. They said, I'm not going to go to some psychiatrist that tells me, Freudian things. So they were losing their credibility or whatever. They were losing their economic power. Lovely. Then they started looking for the magic bullet, and that's what Bob. I know I'm generalizing here, and I really, really encourage anyone to read this book because Bob is very thorough in. It's all based on research. It's based on their research, and what the psychiatrists were looking for is some way that they could medicalize their profession and be the experts. At the same time, the pharmaceuticals, it's not like diabetes where they had a problem and then they figured out what chemicals or what they needed to do to fix it. What they did with psychiatry is they found out by just experimenting that certain drugs did certain things to the mind, and then they said, oh, now this is the disease that it cures. In other words, it was backwards. They fiddled around with the chemicals in the mind, and then they said this is what it is.
So isn't it true that psychiatrists wanted to be recognized on the same level as medical doctors?
Exactly.
Medical doctors treat the physical human being primarily,
yes.
Okay? And then, so psychiatry, who treat the brain, the mind, they manage to parse out that part of the human animal and say, this is the focus of all the difficulty. And if I treat you chemically, rather than talk to you and listen to you and love you, then this is going to make you better.
You bet.
And since, as a result of that, they created the DSM, the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual. You're going to get into that for us?
They did indeed, and thank you for bringing me back to that. The DSM, that was 1952, where they started writing, putting down different diagnoses.
I memorized the son of a gun.
Oh, you did.
A PhD in clinical psychology.
So you know.
And subsequent editions of it.
How would you like now, the last one that came out in 1994 was 886 pages. I looked this up. So I'm glad you didn't have to memorize that. 886 pages with 297 disorders in it. Now there's another one that's in the works right now. I want to say this because people could say, okay, here's a woman who's a little bit, going overboard with this. I want to lead you to Bob Whitaker's book, and then I want you, the audience out there, to Google Alan Francis. Alan Francis, Dr. Alan Francis, was the psychiatrist from Duke University. He was head of the psychiatric department, who was in charge of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual number 4. That was back in 1994. Mm-hmm. He was in charge of it. And 20 years before that, Robert Spitzer was in charge of the DSM-3. Both of those men have now come out and said, stop, we have created a monster. We are creating epidemics, and especially in children. Bipolar, schizophrenic. It started out, of course, with ADD, attention deficit disorder. And these two men who were in charge of this manual that is the Bible for psychiatrists are both adamant about slowing this whole thing down. So it's not just me. And I really would like for people to remember that name, Alan Francis. Google it. He's been writing for the last 2 years.
Isn't it more than a collaboration? It's more a collusion between the pharmaceutical industry and the psychiatric profession, such that the doctors, the psychiatrists, then prescribe the medication that's put out by the pharmaceutical industry. And as long as people are taking these drugs, then the pharmaceutical industry makes profits, a lot of profits.
Huge
and that whole
profits.
story, that narrow aspect of this collusion between these two groups is just incredible. It shows that I think probably 90% of the prescribed medications are useless and even harmful, 80 to 90%.
And there's more studies coming out all the time now, Don, that placebos, when you give someone a sugar pill, they work just as well, if not better, because they don't have the negative side effects.
There was a 60-minute segment recently.
Yeah, I heard about that. I didn't see it.
You gotta see
so
it.
It's coming out. It's coming out, and it's imploding. And I do want to say to the audience, Don and I see each other in passing because we're on the transformative edge. But Don, you did come to the film festival that Rethinking Psychiatry has had for tomorrow night is our last night here in Portland at First Unitarian Church, where we are showing films that are just we're education and outreach about all the potential ways we can help each other live in a society. It's hard to live in this society. We're the strongest most powerful, richest country in the history of the world, yet we're doing terrible things around the world. For sensitive, caring people, this is a hard society to live in and be emotionally okay with it. So there are lots of ways we can support each other besides saying, Dawn, you have a broken brain. If you can get over it, for one thing, if this bothers you, you know, I'm talking about the society we live in, seeing people sleeping on the streets, seeing, you know, children that are hungry in the richest country in the world. If that bothers you, you must have a broken brain if you're depressed or whatever. I'm really exaggerating here, but yes, indeed. And Bob Whitaker, at the end of this book, he does say, because he's gone through the studies so thoroughly, that he can't just say it's just sort of happened. There has been collusion. There's been intentional suppression of facts because the pharmaceuticals have profited hugely, and so have psychiatrists, and especially the psychiatrists who've gone out there. There's one Biederman who is himself, he was Massachusetts General Hospital. He set the whole thing for bipolar, this bipolar epidemic in children. No research, short-term research, and he actually got, I don't know, $1.5 million or something from the pharmaceuticals. What I'm saying is, it's out there.
So
it's out there.
This collusion between the big pharma and the psychiatric profession, what can we do to change that?
Educate yourself. Read this book. If you live in Portland, go to our website. I guess I haven't said that yet. RethinkingPsychiatry.org. RethinkingPsychiatry.org.
We're going to put that up on the screen in a
Okay.
minute. RethinkingPsychiatry.org.
And we actually have just, it's amazing what we have done in the last year. And it has a life of its own because people want to know about this. I don't think there's a person in our society.
What will people learn when they go to that website? What will they learn?
Okay, they'll learn, for one thing, well, they would have learned that we are having that film festival, which the last one is tomorrow. They'll learn about books like Bob Whitaker's book.
Yeah.
They'll learn that we are in May having a symposium. This was be our second 2-day symposium, Rethinking Psychiatry. Last year, we had 40 workshops of alternative ways to work with people when they are in distress emotionally.
40 workshops
40
across
workshops.
the country?
No, this was just here in Portland. Well, it was Oregon. We had people from around Oregon, but mostly it was the
And
Portland.
the purpose of the workshops?
Rethink Psychiatry. Alternatives to this. The thing about our system now is that we force medication. We force it 2 ways. And personally, when you said, what can you do about it? I have 2 goals, Don. And they're going to happen while I'm here, and I'm going to be here for a while. I'm talking about on this planet. But I think in the next 5 years, we can get it off TV. It's immoral that they advertise drugs on TV. We don't advertise liquor.
You think we're going to get drug advertising off of TV in 5 years?
Yes.
Dreamer.
No. I'll be here to celebrate, okay? I'll be here to celebrate. I'm going to work on it. Ralph Nader's been working on it. There are other groups that I just Googled it before I came on here. There are groups who are outraged, as we all should be. I mean, everybody knows it's not right.
You're going to overcome the need for corporate greed and profit?
Aren't we doing
Come
it
on,
already?
Marcia.
Aren't we going to occupy our own minds? So I'm going to do that. And then the second thing I'm going to do.
We've got to talk about Occupy too. So
Yes, we
finish
do.
with this.
The other thing I'm going to do, though, and when you ask what people can do, you can help get it off TV. If you see petitions or whatever, that'll be I'm going to ratchet that one up. You know, we will around the country. There's a universal voice. The other one is not to label children. And children are the Achilles heel of all this because
What do you mean by labeling children?
ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. Dawn, I taught for 30 years. Probably 10 of those years were in rooms with no windows. And then we tell the kids something's wrong with them when they can't sit in front of a teacher like me in a room with no windows.
So
this is a 5th grader, 6th
says
grader.
this child has attention deficit disorder, and the way we can do something about it is give them this drug.
Yes.
Yes, and it shows that the drugs are not really doing anything
Except
to
leading to more
alleviate the
drugs.
symptoms of ADD. and you're talking about the reasons for ADD, and I cut you off there.
Yes,
You want
you
to continue
did.
with that?
And I also, well, I mean, yes, and you know it as well as I do. And I've been, Tom Hartman, he talks about
Yay,
ADD,
Tom
yes.
Hartman.
EAA, elevated attention asset. That's what it is. It's not ADD, it's elevated attention asset. Those kids are very aware. They're very tuned in, but they're not able to sit there and be in their box.
Why is
and
that?
we've made it a negative, and why is it? Because we're all different, and we all have different ways of taking in this reality. And the more sensitive you are, the harder it is for you to sit in that box and listen to me for 5.5 hours. Can you imagine that? Those poor kids.
Why are there so many children now who are labeled or diagnosed as attention deficit disorder? Why is that?
It's just exploded. This Biederman had some,
Why?
mean, because of the advertising on TV. I do think food has a lot to do with it, but we don't address those things. Also, just think of, this whole thing about our society and how we push our kids in competition and parents that are strung out. I'm talking about strung out emotionally. So there's lots of reasons, but these kids don't have broken brains. They're just having a hard time. And the only thing
Broken brains meaning there's something wrong with their brains.
them, right? And labeling a child, labeling anything in a capitalistic society, and capitalism is fine in balance with everything else. But when it's all about capitalism, as soon as you label something, then you commodify it, and that's what we've done with kids and disorders. We call them disorders. So this whole labeling, plus it's terrible for a child's self-concept to be labeled. You can imagine. You know all of this. I'm not telling you anything new.
Well, we're talking about it among ourselves, and we want to be sure the viewers know what we're talking about. Capitalist society, I'm not sure that's too broad a brush to find the reason for labeling so many of our children as attention deficit disorder. The children are behaving this way because of how they're socialized and how they're taught is important in their life and in their existence. And you touched on it earlier. Instead of modeling and teaching our children what's important to focus on, to spend our attention on, is living for the moment and not being preoccupied with what's going to happen in the future or later on. And the more simple stuff that's hard for us to grasp nowadays, like experiencing and being kind to each other, and my motto, KFC. And the way the system and the society and the culture is going, and the competition rather than cooperation between human beings, particularly in America, it encourages this kind of behavior that is considered attention deficit disorder. And children of that age, their attention span is limited anyhow. So here's a window of opportunity for me to come in here and give them some drugs.
You bet. And they're doing it to 2-year-olds. Somebody told me they're doing it to 1-year-olds. What I'm saying is they're diagnosing children for not being normal, and they are defining normal. This is 1984 kind of stuff, but it's really happening. And I'm sorry I don't have the statistics as far as the just mushrooming of children with what they have found out is this ADD thing. By the time they get to be teenagers, they become bipolar, which means they start this kind of thing, and now there's an epidemic of bipolar, which was hardly even, Bob points out in this book, even here in this society before. So one thing leads to another. You can't fuss around with our brains.
Every 20 years or so, there's a new diagnosis du jour.
Exactly.
Everybody's that way.
And a new pill for that.
Time is running out. You're going to talk about Occupy?
I just think that part of rethinking psychiatry is the whole Occupy. Occupy is creating a horizontal interconnectedness, partnership kind of relationship with each other and with the earth. And that's what I think we do when I saw my kindergartners. If somebody got hurt, they wanted to help. What I'm saying is we get socialized out of this caring, sharing. I think Occupy is taking us right back where we feel, where our heart takes us, where our humanity, where our spirit takes us. So I see Rethinking Psychiatry as very much part of the Occupy movement, and certainly Unitarian Universalism. I'm very proud of our church because it's been there for the Occupy movement. I'm so excited. And you and I know what happened with the corporate personhood issue right here in Portland is the Occupy group came along and just pushed it right over the edge. What I'm saying is things we've been working on for 10, 12 years, then there's enough young, knowing energy there for these issues that are no-brainers. Do you medicate a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old? Do you medicate yourself? Excuse me. So the Occupy, I think those young people see things a lot more clearly. They're not as invested and haven't been brainwashed as much as the ones of us that have, are older. So I'm very excited about it. Yeah.
What's the Occupy movement about?
It's about this horizontalism. It's about equality. It's about listening to everyone. It's about valuing everyone, the interconnectedness of the web of life, not taking more than you need.
What's the Occupy movement, what kind of effect is it going to have on the corporatocracy?
Well, it already is. It's going to have more of an effect. I told you we're going to get this off of TV. And we're going to we can do this. We can do this, Don, because this is the same I love this, in the 60s when the baby boomers were, feeling their moral indignation, then we sort of got co-opted. But we had to go up against our parents, and we had to go up, it was a very male-oriented way that we were progressing. These young people, if you've been down there to the Occupy movement, I was before they were discamped, but they're still there down at St. Francis Church. They go home to parents, the ones of them who are living here, and their parents are saying, what happened? What can we do to support you? What I'm saying is there's a whole different awareness, consciousness. Our poor parents had gone through, the wars and the hard times. We've had a pretty good time, and now we realize we need to support these young people who are looking at the much bigger picture.
What is it that's similar between the Occupy in America and the Occupy movements in the Mediterranean and other countries? It seems to be going on all over the world in countries who are just rebelling at the domination and the rule of the super rich and the elite. Do you think the Occupy is going to have, do you think the American empire is going to go quietly away into the dark?
Do I think it's here to stay? Is that what you're asking?
Thank you.
I very much think so. And this is something you don't hear very often, and I hope you don't mind me saying it. Because people don't want to hear it. I guess it scares them. When my mother was born, 1918, she wasn't even a human being in this United States of America. She couldn't vote. She was a woman, a girl, a baby. Now, by the time she was 21, she could. But when I was born in 45, it had only been 25 years that women had
Only
voice.
25 years.
You're hearing the feminine voice down there, and it's not just the feminine voice in women, it's the feminine voice in men. It's the voice that's been suppressed in an empire kind of patriarchal system. You can't have caring and sharing in that kind of system. So I used to say the genie is out of the bottle or something. Well, it's out of the lamp. That's where the genie came out, and it's light. And she's not going back in. And that she is in men and women. And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing caring, sharing. It's the natural in both men and women. But in a system that is an empire system, you have to get boys not to feel. You can't go send them to war and have them kill people. So anyway, that's the difference. That's the positive, Don. We're not getting past this. We are getting into a partnership mode within ourselves, with each other, and with this planet.
Okay, it's close to time for us to stop now, because if I don't stop you, we'll be going on till midnight. Keep your pens and pencils handy, because I may want to say something to you or show you something in the closing credits that you may want to make a note of. Thanks for watching again, and give us feedback, both positive and negative, about any aspect of the show. It helps us to give you a better show in the future. A few public service announcements. I'm going to tell you about the Conversations with Dr. Don local broadcast schedule. To get the Dr. Don local broadcast schedule, go to my website, www.donbaham.com. And you want to watch Dr. Don shows on the web, go to my website again and click on favorite links. Okay, the next one I want to tell you about is the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, I think our civil liberties would be long gone, because I think the Obama administration is continuing with the ACLU's destruction of our civil liberties that was practiced by the Bush administration. You want to get Dr. Don shows broadcast by other stations around the country, ask your local public access station to go to www.pigmedia.org. This is for you people who are watching in other parts of the country. You go to your local public access station. And now about ending corporate personhood. This is one of my favorites here. We've got to end corporate personhood because our nation is controlled and ruled by corporations. So to end corporate personhood, go to that website, www.movetoamend.org. And do we have anything more? Oh, I got to say thanks for watching. And remember, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, and be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too. And you.
Be kind,
and you in the
be
control
kind,
room.
be kind.
Thanks again for watching. Say bye-bye, so.